Hi, welcome to Therapeutic Cuisine. I'm Kelly Yorke, and I specialize in creating recipes that include medicinal ingredients that target and alleviate various human common health conditions. Today we're going to focus on inflammation. Inflammation is something that a lot of you probably have heard about in the media lately because it's linked to so many degenerative diseases. But do you really know what it is? Inflammation is actually not a bad thing. It is part of your immune system. When you get a cut, when you get bacteria, when you get an injury, when you get attacked or something that's going abnormally wrong in your body has various chemicals that senses that, and it sends out white blood cells that are made in your bone marrow, and that starts the healing process. This is all good, and it happens in a very finite amount of time. There's an ending and a beginning. What's wrong with inflammation that we have to watch and be careful about in life is chronic inflammation. That's when that process doesn't know when to turn off. There are signals in our bodies that get out of balance because we eat the wrong foods, we have too much stress in our lives, we have environmental things that we're exposed to like we never have before in human history. All of those things equate to your body sending out signals or misinterpreting the signals so that the inflammation doesn't turn off. And then you have those white blood cells that hang around in your bloodstream and don't go away for a long time, and that is not good. That creates an environment that can lead to degenerative diseases. Diseases such as cancer, diabetes, arthritis. All of the itises are symptoms of an imbalanced immunity system. But that can be alleviated with diet and lifestyles. But we're going to focus today on the diet and the things that you can eat for various types of inflammation that will help ease it. We're going to do 3 recipes. Our first recipe is going to be a scramble in a jiffy. A lot of folks get into that rut where you eat cereal milk in the morning, and cereal milk, depending on the type of cereal it is, if it's not a whole grain, it's pretty inflammatory. This recipe is an alternative to milk and cereal. Milk and cereal is very inflammatory, especially the ones that have a lot of sugar on top and are sweet. This recipe is something that you can make in the microwave in 3 to 5 minutes for up to 4, the whole family, or one at a time. You can eat it on the run. It is eggs, which are slightly inflammatory, but you bring up the anti-inflammatory points by adding extra spices. The first ingredient is the spices. The spices are what are going to really kick up that anti-inflammatory rating of this recipe. First, coriander and chili powder. And chili powder is very high on the anti-inflammatory scale. All of the peppers are, especially even the sweet ones, the green, reds, and yellows, all those very colorful peppers. And then next we're going to add, which is the superstar of anti-inflammatory spices, is turmeric, cumin, onion, and garlic. You want to add your spices first because next is we're going to pour the eggs and the milk on top of that, and you don't want the spices to be floating on top of the eggs. So you're going to mix the eggs into the spices so that they blend very nicely. And now that this is all whisked nice and evenly and blended, we're going to pour this mixture into some mugs that are pre-sprayed with extra virgin olive oil. And I like to use a spray that isn't an aerosol can, like get a pump sprayer, or you can even take a paper towel and wipe it around the inside of the glass. But you do want to have them pre-oiled. We're going to pour about 5/8 of a cup of the eggs into each mug. Depending on how big your batch is, you can have 2, 4, 6, 8, whatever your family size is. Okay, now that we've poured the eggs in the coffee mugs, we're going to cook them in the microwave for about 3 minutes. I'm going to clean up this place a little bit, and when we come back, we're going to garnish our eggs in a jiffy. Okay, now that we've cooked our eggs in a jiffy, we're going to garnish them. We're going to start with just taking a little bit of, real quick, you just take some salsa that's ready and prepared, some cheese, and you don't have to, if you're lactose intolerant, you can use black beans. It doesn't have to be the cheese, but this is a low-fat cheese. And the difference is, don't use a non-fat cheese. If you use a low-fat cheese or a non-fat cheese, that means that the molecules have been manipulated. But reduced cheese means that you're using 2% milk to make the cheese. And also, use a grass-fed organic cheese. And I use, finally, some scallions. Scallions are very anti-inflammatory. They add a little bit of extra green and garnish. And so you can serve it with an accompaniment such as a paleo bread or a whole grain, low glycemic breakfast bread. No bagels. That's it. We'll be right back with a pork vindaloo. Okay, now we're going to make pork vindaloo. The first thing that we're going to do is marinate our meat in spices. Vindaloo, by the way, is a curry dish that is very common in India, and it includes vinegar and chilies and tamarind. Tamarind is a vegetable pod that has a pulp in it that you use to make powders, pastes, nectars, and today we're going to use a little bit of nectar and make our vindaloo. The first thing you want to do is use those beautiful anti-inflammatory spices like coriander, ginger, onion, turmeric, chili powders, and add your vinegar. Give it a stir so everything gets evenly distributed, and then we're going to let that sit for at least 2 hours, sometimes up to 24, like overnight in your refrigerator. So normally I would let this sit and it would absorb all those wonderful spices. And next we're going to caramelize some onions. We're going to take some clarified butter or ghee. Actually, I prefer ghee because it's a little bit nuttier in flavor. Add about a couple tablespoons. I like to get my pan hot first because if you put your fat into the pan when it's cold and then let it come up to heat, you're making it too hot. When it gets to that smoking point, it's already starting to oxidize, which means the fats are turning into trans fats. Caramelized onions, you want them to cook slow and low. So I'm going to turn this heat down. That's way too high. And it usually takes about 15 minutes to caramelize, more like 30 to 40. Nice and slow and low, and let those sugars come out and get nice and caramelized, sweet and nutty. Once those are nice and caramelized, we're going to add tomatoes. Now let this cook, and your meat. Let this cook for about 7-8 minutes till the meat is no longer pink in the middle. So we're going to let that go. It'll cook down a little bit. The meat will get cooked through. Okay, now that we've added the meat, we need this to cook for 7 or 8 minutes. Now, pork is what I'm using for the dish today, but you can actually use any other kind of protein, preferably one that is nice and lean, like chicken or shrimp. You can use lamb, but lamb's pretty inflammatory. Actually, the fat part of the meat is not the worst thing because a lot of your omega-3s are fat soluble, they're fatty acids, and they stay in the fat. So when you trim off too much, you're trimming off some of the omega-3s. And the omega-3s are very good. They help balance out the omega-6 that we eat way too much of in this day and age. The omega-6s are in fast foods, they're in vegetable oils, especially the ones that are refined. They're in processed foods everywhere. We get so much of that in our diets today, and we don't eat a lot of the omega-3s, which is cold water fish, flax seeds is a good choice of that, chia seeds. The omega-3 balance to the omega-6 is about 1:50 today. Back in the times when we were evolving as humans, it was 1:1. It's no surprise that we have a pro-inflammatory scenario in our modern day world. Our Western food today is very much out of whack, and you can see all these degenerative diseases going sky high. If you look at the first world countries where there's not so much processed foods in the pipeline, you don't find those kinds of diseases. So it's something that will really make an impact in your diet if you drop those kinds of foods. Eat more fresh vegetables. They have antioxidants in them. That really helps. You want to cut out the saturated fats and the trans fats. Saturated fats and trans fats are also loaded in processed foods. Okay, now the vindaloo has been cooking for 7 or 8 minutes and the pork is now cooked through. We're going to add a tamarind broth and then let it go for about another 30 minutes. The tamarind is a pod that is grown in Africa, Asia, and it is the main ingredient that is used to make Worcestershire sauce. It tastes like a combination of dates and lemons and apricots. Sometimes you get it as a paste, you can get it as a nectar, you can get it as a powder. I don't recommend that you use the nectar because they still have a lot of them that are using high fructose corn syrup in it, and that's really something you want to avoid. But if the nectar has a little bit of cane sugar in it, just make sure that it has under 6 grams of sugar in it. It's getting pretty much to be candy when it's anything higher than that. But the tamarind, you can, if you can't find it at your local grocery store, you can get the tamarind pods, usually at a Hispanic grocery store or an Indian grocer. And what you want to do is split open the pods, pull out the pulp in the middle, and then take about a 1 ounce ball and put it in some warm water, about 1.5 cups, and let it seep overnight, then strain it, and then you can go from there. Today we're using a combination of tamarind paste and water. So we're going to add that finally to the vindaloo, and we're going to let it cook for about another 30 minutes. You just want to mainly let it all meld together, and you also want the pork to get real nice and soft. Now that I got the tamarind in here, I'm going to let this cook for about 30 minutes, and then we're going to come back and we're going to plate. Okay, so now the tamarind has cooked for about 30 minutes. I can smell the flavors are smelling right. I'm getting ready to plate it up. What I suggest is that you plate it over a starch that's a whole grain, like a turmeric rice. I love to cook rice with a lot of turmeric in it because, again, it's a king of the anti-inflammatory spices. You also want to stay away from a refined rice. The whole grains take longer to get into your bloodstream, and so you don't get that glycemic spike. When you have a pulverized grain, the starches are all broken down and it's going to go right to your bloodstream. When your insulin goes up, you have more pro-inflammatory chemicals that are going to be released into your system, and it goes into a downward spiral. You'll have more and more inflammation building off of itself. When you have extra weight, when you put on those extra pounds, you have more inflammatory chemicals also going to the rescue. Your fat cells actually increase. And when that happens, your body, those signaling cells will actually sense that there's something wrong, and you go into that downward spiral. So what I recommend is that you use a whole grain starch. What we have here is a whole grain brown rice that has been pilafed in a broth that has, guess what, more turmeric. But that beautiful yellow color really looks pretty with the vindaloo. And when you serve this, it's a very warming, spicy dish. Not hot spicy so much, but just very flavorful. This is a great dish to garnish with fruits and nuts. I like to use, sometimes unsweetened shaved coconut. Chunks of pineapple are very good. Pistachio nuts. Nuts are very good for you for an anti-inflammatory diet. They have vitamin E in it if it's almonds, vitamin D if it's walnuts. Those are super nuts to eat. Walnuts is a great source of omega-3s if you're a vegetarian. Again, this dish can be made for vegetarians. You don't have to use the meat. You can use rutabagas, meaty vegetables that you can cook into the spices, and using the tamarind broth. Again, a wonderful vegetarian meal. Some people also like to put a little bit of Greek yogurt on the top just to give it a little bit more of a creaminess. But pork vindaloo is a great entree for dinner. And so, as I said, colorful garnishes, and with those different textures, the nuts, the fruits, the sweet. The vindaloo kind of has a sweet and sour flavor, but it's not real sweet. You get the sweetness from the vegetables. And chopped cherry tomatoes, which are great. They're full of antioxidants and lycopene is good for, it's good for prostate health. And there you have it, a colorful pork vindaloo full of antioxidants and anti-inflammatory spices. And don't go anywhere, we're going to be right back with some salmon sliders. And now we're back, and we're going to make salmon sliders. Salmon is a cold water fatty fish that is high in omega-3s, and these make a wonderful appetizer, dinner, lunch. So we're going to put salmon that has had the skin cut off, and we're going to cut it up into 1-inch chunks, only because you don't want to jam your food processor. We're going to process, this is about 12 ounces. This is going to make 8 small burgers, and it's slightly chopped up here. We're going to take the bowl and take out 2/3 of what I just mixed up and leave a little bit more in, and we're going to puree that. That's going to help bind our burgers without having to use as much breadcrumbs that you normally would use. So one last little pulse here. A little noisy. I think that's good enough. So out that comes. Be careful of the blade. This is really hard to pull out when your hands are covered with salmon. Back into the bowl that goes. And then we're going to add a myriad of anti-inflammatory ingredients. Lots of spices. This has got an Asian kind of bend to it. So first we're going to put in, we do put some breadcrumbs in, but we're using panko, which is a Japanese breadcrumb. And then garlic and ginger, which are wonderful for the anti-inflammatory diet. There are compounds in onion and garlic that can actually work as good as an aspirin for helping dampen the pain in your body and your joints. We just put in some dry mustard. This is a little bit of hot chili pepper, soy sauce, and you want to use the low sodium kind. So I just added some chopped cilantro and now a little bit of egg whites, and that's going to moisten it up and help bind it. And they're going to give that a nice little stir. Just make it into a burger blend. And we're going to put this in the refrigerator for a while to let all the flavors meld. And you got to get your hands in. You could do this with a spoon, but good clean hands and good touch, it's a good thing with cooking. These are going to be now formed into little patties, about 1/2 inch thick, 3 inches in diameter. Patty them up. It's actually perfect, about one little handful. And stick them on a cookie sheet or a plate. So you want to keep these patties kind of a consistent shape so they all cook about the same time. Again, about 1/2 inch thick and 3 inches wide in diameter. We're going to take these and let them sit for a while because we're going to cut some pumpernickel bread to make the rolls. And as we do that, these can sit in the refrigerator, but cover them with some saran wrap so they don't get really crusted or dried out on the top. Whenever I make these, they usually are the first thing that go on the table. Even folks that don't like salmon seem to like these, and they're just a little few bites, so they make a good little nosh. Okay, so that does it for the burgers, and now we're going to cook them. And while they're cooking, these can just sit and meld their flavors together. We're going to take some olive oil and put this in a skillet. The skillet is preheated so that, again, we're not going to let this oil slowly heat and get to the smoking point. You're going to cook these about 3 minutes per side, just till they're golden brown and the fish is cooked all the way through. And so our salmon is cooking. Meanwhile, while that's happening, I'm going to tell you a little bit about salmon. There's wild salmon, and then there is farm-raised salmon. The wild salmon comes mostly from Alaska, at least our sources here in the United States. It comes from the cold waters. You want to get that wild salmon as opposed to the farm salmon, because the farm salmon is fed grains versus wild feed, wild plankton, wild fish. And guess what? When the grain is being fed to the fish on the farm, it's probably a GMO type of grain. And when you eat that too. So wild salmon is what you want to try to look for in the store. Most packages will say wild salmon or farm raised. There is a lot of changes that are being done with farms right now, and hopefully there'll be a day where it'll be environmentally balanced for us to be able to go and with pride be able to buy our fish from the farm, but we're not quite there yet. So meanwhile, the salmon that is caught in Alaska is actually very sustainable. They do a really good job with their industry up there. And salmon is a very pungent, flavorful fish. And believe me, salmon is one of my favorite fish. You can get it just about almost anywhere now. Even the canned fish is actually good for you. These salmon are starting to look really nice and tasty. They're getting very close to being done. And I love that they have a little bit of an Asian flavor to it. I think Asian flavors really lend well to salmon. Okay, so these look almost perfectly ready to go. So don't go anywhere. I'm going to go and clean up real quick, and then we're going to come back, plate these up, and do a little summary of what we've done today. Okay, so now the salmon patties are ready and they're looking delicious, so we're going to go ahead and plate it up. What I did while they were cooking is I used a 3-inch biscuit cutter and I cut slices out of pumpernickel bread. With the bread cut, I'm going to take my Dijon mustard. I mixed a little bit of wasabi powder in that. It gives it just a little bit more kick. The Dijon mustard has pretty good of a kick, but the wasabi adds another little bit of that Asian dimension to it that just tastes good with the salmon. The salmon has so much fat in it that the cut of the mustard really works. On top of that, I'm going to add some dill pickles. Now, dill pickles you wouldn't think goes with Asian. It really works with this too. After that, we're going to layer the salmon, and I'm working with one right now. And then we're going to layer another sauce on top. This is just ketchup with wasabi. Ketchup and mustard, very burger-like. And then any kind of nice green, we're using pea tendrils today. I normally would use watercress, you can use parsley, kale is really excellent, and kale is an excellent omega-3 green. You top that with the remaining bread and then skewer it with a frill pick. Make a whole platter of those, and you can serve this family style, or as we're doing here, plate it up as a single entree. This is a nice lunch. You can serve this. I recommend using a Asian slaw like we have here. Kale salads are excellent. There's wonderful recipes out there that you can find on the internet or cookbooks. Very trendy right now. Top that with the remaining patty here. A little bit of ketchup with wasabi, pea tendrils, or any green of your choice, one more slice of pumpernickel, and a skewer. And there you have it, salmon sliders. They go perfectly with an accompaniment of an Asian slaw and your morning entree, which is eggs in a jiffy. And there you have it, pork vindaloo with turmeric rice, a wonderful daily intake of anti-inflammatory meals. I'm Chef Kelly Yorke, and thank you for joining me on Therapeutic Cuisine. And as the father of medicine said, let food be thy medicine, let medicine be thy food. I look forward to seeing you next time.